mean, we're in the phase of draconian policing at the moment. The rioting has reached a stage where the next phase, which is the more interesting phase, as far as I'm concerned, as a politician, is identifying what the root causes of the protests and violence were, and then finding genuine, sustainable solutions for them, settling the position. But right now, we're still in the police enforcement phase where we just got to clamp down on this thing and stop it from happening.
A recently elected MP for Clacton, the leader of Reform UK, Nigel Farage, has been criticised for sparking conspiracies related to the Southport attack by questioning whether authorities were withholding information. He's since suggested two-tier policing, which the PM says is a non-issue. Nevertheless, the hashtag two-tier Keir has been trending on X. Let's have a listen to former Home Secretary Priti Patel speaking to Times Radio Breakfast.
I've seen the statement and the comments that he has made, particularly about the Black Lives Matter protests, which, by the way, took place during the pandemic when we had a range of restrictions around protests. There's a clear difference between effectively blocking streets or roads being closed to burning down libraries, hotels, food banks, and attacking places of worship.
So there's not two-tier policing?
Those kinds of comments are simply not relevant right now. That is not correct. It is not correct.
Well, let's speak to Ben Habib, who has served previously as co-leader of Reform UK. Ben, good evening to you.
Good evening. I was co-deputy leader, just for the record. Yeah, that's all right.
No, it's good. Thank you for that. Can I start actually with a comment from a Labour MP? This is Andy MacDonald, who told Times Radio today that Nigel Farage and Lee Anderson have been stirring up racial hatred. Do you agree with that?
I don't agree with that. I think that Nigel and Lee expressed themselves forthrightly and stridently, but I don't think they're stoking racial hatred. I think that is taking it too far. And I would argue that those who accuse Nigel and Lee of that are treading on the edge of trying to shut down debate and trying to shut down their ability to express their views without feeling constrained. And I mean, everyone, particularly elected representatives, have to be careful in the language that they use because it can be, it can have consequences, real life consequences. But I don't think Nigel or Lee are guilty of inciting racial hatred. I just don't agree with that.
Yeah, okay, fair enough. And you talk then of the consequences of the language of politicians. What then of Nigel Farage's language in the context of the misinformation that was spread in the aftermath of the Southport stabbing attack last week?
So, I mean, there was definite misinformation spread, wasn't there? Because the name that was going round on Twitter, the name of I can't remember the name of the chap that was put forward as the possible perpetrator of those horrible crimes.
Probably best that we don't.
No, but there was a false name that was put out. And that set a whole load of hairs running inappropriately, as it turns out, with the benefit of better information. And I think what Nigel was trying to do was to try to get the police to disclose what it is they had. But of course, it's not down to the police to decide whether or not they disclose someone's identity. It's down to a court. A judge must decide whether it's appropriate in the public interest and so on to release, particularly in this case, a young offender's name. And as it transpires, I don't have the full facts, but as it transpires, the offender, I think, is suffering from some kind of mental health issue, as opposed to an ideological terroristic.
I don't know. But we don't know the ins and outs, so we shan't speculate on that either. Yeah. I think let's keep it focused on things that we do know. And I suppose there's a consideration here. I mean, are you calling today for the rioters to stop?
I would not wish anyone to riot ever.
Yeah.
I think what we saw in Leeds, what we saw in Whitechapel, what we've seen in Hartlepool, Southport, Bolton yesterday, which went largely unreported. I think all these violent protests are unacceptable. We have a right
They're not
to protest.
Protests, are they, at this point? They're riots.
No, I said violent protests. Okay, riots, whatever you want to call them. They're unacceptable. Absolutely, 100%. We have a right to protest, and that should be done peacefully. There was a peaceful protest outside Downing Street last Thursday, and some of my friends were there, people who I know to be entirely peaceable, and they were roughed up by the police. So there was something peculiar going on at least that day. Martin Daubney, who's a presenter on GB News, was handcuffed. And when he
Well,
explained to the
also there were
police,
over 100 arrests in the aftermath of that. Police were attacked. Flares were thrown at the gates of
yeah,
Downing Street. That
so,
doesn't sound very
but,
peaceful, Mr. Habib.
well, the people to whom I'm referring were peaceful, and at the time that they were handcuffed, including Martin Daubney, he was acting entirely
Well,
peaceably.
I don't know
And
about him, but what I can say is that
yeah,
Metropolitan Police officers were attacked and assaulted. At least 2 were injured.
yeah, but can I just finish the point I'm making? So Martin was handcuffed, hands behind his back, and then when he explained to the police officer that he was a presenter on GB News and he had no ill feeling, towards Downing Street or wasn't intent on doing any damage, they released him, and that raises a whole load of questions in my head. Why would they have arrested him? Why would they handcuff him, arrest him in the first place if there was no just cause? And if there was just cause to handcuff him, then they certainly shouldn't release him just because he happens to be a presenter at GB News and self-declares himself to be peaceful.
I mean, it's
So
a
something,
slightly odd
when the
senirio,
police,
though, isn't it? And we don't know. We
it
don't
is
know
a
that
very,
we
but
can't
when the
speak to
police
the ins
do
and
that
outs
kind
of
of
that,
thing,
can
but
we?
when the police do that kind of thing, it can stir people up. It wouldn't stir Martin up. But I have another friend who was there that day, chap who was very kind to me, came up to Wellingborough, incredibly peaceful chap, who was handcuffed and held in police custody for 20 hours and then released for nothing. No charges made, no accusation
But
made.
again, we don't know the specifics of these situations. I think we need to talk more
But I'm telling you,
broadly.
there is stuff going on that's a bit weird.
A bit weird, right? Okay, but we need to work our way through this, don't we? To
Sure.
get these riots to stop, because this is not
Yeah.
constructive for anyone.
Agreed.
What is that? What is the way through?
Well, I mean, we're in the phase of draconian policing at the moment. The rioting has reached a stage where the next phase, which is the more interesting phase, as far as I'm concerned, as a politician, is identifying what the root causes of the protests and violence were, and then finding genuine, sustainable solutions for them, settling the position. But right now, we're still in the police enforcement phase where we just got to clamp down on this thing and stop it from happening.